The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like trapped insects as Brooke Sullivan checked the monitors on bed 7. Sinus rhythm. Stable. She made a note on the chart with the kind of handwriting that belonged in a courtroom, not an ICU night shift. Precise. Defensive. The kind of penmanship that said, "I was here, I documented it, I did this right." The hospital smelled like bleach and recirculated air and something underneath, the copper-sweet smell of old blood that never quite left the walls no matter how many times housekeeping scrubbed. Mercy General in Portland didn't have the newest equipment or the brightest staff meetings. What it had was Brooke, alone most nights, moving between beds like she was reading a language only she could speak. Her scrubs were navy blue, copper-stained at the cuff where she'd gripped a mug at 2:44 a.m. Her name badge read R. Sullivan, RN. Not a single credential beyond that. Not a single story beyond what people could see. She had a limp in her left leg that worsened by 0400, though nobody ever asked why. The wound had closed 18 years ago. The memory never did. Her locker contained a pair of worn combat boots wrapped in plastic, the leather cracked and salt-stained. She touched them before every shift. Her fingers knew every crease, every scuff. The leather was the color of dried blood. Sometimes she could still smell the dust from Fallujah embedded in the sole treads, though that was impossible. Nothing from that place should have traveled home. Nothing was supposed to travel home. She'd carried those boots through a minefield once. Carried something heavier just behind. Morning rounds came at 0645. Dr. Hargrove swept in like a man who'd never heard the word no, tall, silver-haired, wearing a Rolex that cost more than Brooke made in 3 months. His presence made the air pressure change, the way a storm front moves in before you see the clouds. He had the kind of confidence that came from never being questioned, from connections that paid better than competence, from knowing exactly which palms to grease and exactly how much. He watched Brooke chart a patient's 0400 assessment with perfect penmanship. Each number placed exactly where it belonged. Each vital sign recorded with the precision of someone who'd learned that documentation was armor. "Still here, Sullivan?" Hargrove asked. Not a question. A dismissal disguised as conversation. "Ever think about going back to school? Rail healthcare provider? Not just." He gestured with his coffee cup, a Starbucks thing, artisanal foam art on top. "Night shift nursing." Brooke set down her pen. One measured breath. "Sinus rhythm. I'm exactly where I need to be, doctor." Her voice came out soft. Deferential. A woman who knew her place. A woman who'd learned early that the quietest people in the room got to keep their secrets. Hargrove smiled like a wolf showing its teeth and moved to the next bed. That afternoon, the chart appeared in the system at 1447. General Marcus Wade, admitted to Mercy General ICU with a red flag that flashed like a warning beacon. The words came in clinical language, but they meant the same thing to everyone who read them: liability. Risk. Money that could walk away. Decorated Special Forces Commander. 3 tours. Bilateral blindness secondary to IED blast, Baghdad, Jolan District, 18 months prior. Complex post-traumatic complications. Cardiac irregularity secondary to nerve damage. No stable residence. No family. No next of kin listed as willing to authorize treatment outside protocol. The file went on in that careful language, but the subtext was written in red ink: this man was already broken by the time he got here. 7 doctors. That was the number Brooke saw when she pulled up his full history. 7. Not 5. Not 6. 7 different physicians at 3 different hospitals, all of them with the same reason stamped on their refusal documents: liability concerns and resource constraints. Medical language for, "we don't get paid enough to fix you." Route him to county, Hargrove told the charge nurse, not looking at the chart, already moving to the next admission. "We're full up." Mercy General was never full up. Mercy General had beds. What it didn't have was the kind of insurance that made liability irrelevant. Brooke was standing 3 feet away when she saw the name. Not on the chart. That would have been manageable. That would have been data. She saw it when she pulled up the patient photo, the arrival image taken in the ER, this man lying on a stretcher, blindfolded by bandages, one arm at his side and the other tattoo clearly visible. Sullivan. Her hand dropped. Her pen fell. It hit the tile floor and made a sound like a bullet casing, bright and metallic and impossible to ignore. The name was tattooed on his inner forearm in blocky military letters. Not a surname. A call sign. The name of the person who'd pulled him out of the burning Humvee 4 miles into hostile territory, who'd kept his airway open while rounds snapped past like angry wasps, who'd run on a broken leg and dragged a 200-pound Special Forces commander through a minefield at Sanjan Valley because the alternative was leaving him for the Taliban to find. That name. That call sign. That name she hadn't heard spoken aloud in 18 years because the operation never happened, the records were erased, and Senior Chief Petty Officer Brooke Sullivan had been ordered to disappear by a 3-star general who'd looked her directly in the eye and said the words that changed everything, prison or worse. She picked up her pen. Her hand was steady by the time she straightened. Muscle memory. The same calm that came from having already survived the worst. The same composure that kept people alive when everything else fell apart. General Marcus Wade lay in ICU bed 3 beds down from where she stood. She could see him from here, the outline of a man diminished by what had happened to him, what had been taken, what could never be returned. His eyes were closed. Behind those eyelids was absolute darkness. Behind those eyelids was the face of a woman he'd last seen before the blast, the voice he should have heard pulling him toward alive. And neither of those things would ever match again because she'd been a ghost for 18 years and ghosts didn't have voices. She walked toward his bed like she walked toward every bed. No hurry. No hesitation. Just the ordinary movements of an ordinary night nurse checking vitals on an ordinary patient. Her left leg ached where the shrapnel had gone in, where the surgeons had said she'd probably limp forever, where she'd decided 18 years ago that limping was the smallest price for breathing. General Wade. Her voice came out exactly as it had in every other patient interaction. Soft. Professional. A woman who knew her boundaries. I'm Brooke. I'll be monitoring your vitals tonight. Can I get you anything? His head turned toward the sound. His hands moved on the white hospital sheet like they were searching for something, the steering wheel of a vehicle, a rifle grip, a radio handset. Things his brain still believed existed. Things that blindness had taken away but muscle memory had not. My rescuer, he said. His voice was rough like a tank idling in a garage, something massive running on fumes. The doctors keep saying they don't have information. Do you know who brought me out? There was a call sign. Sullivan. Do you? He turned his head toward where her voice had come from. Do you know what happened to them? Brooke checked his heart rate monitor. 88, slightly elevated. She made a note on his chart. Her handwriting was perfect. Defensive. A woman with nothing to hide because she was hiding everything. I'm sure they're wherever they need to be, General. I used to know, he said, and there was something in his voice that sounded like the bottom of a well, dark and deep and echoing. I used to know exactly who saved my life. Now they're just a name on my arm. A tattoo that proves they existed but doesn't prove anything else. Brooke adjusted his full line with one hand while the other maintained her composure. One measured breath. She'd held arteries closed with these hands. She'd sealed wounds with muscle and wool and the kind of training that never left your body. She could hold herself together now. She had been holding herself together for 18 years. Rest, General, she said, and her voice sounded like it belonged to someone else entirely. Someone smaller. Someone who'd learned that the only way to survive knowing the truth was to become a very, very good liar. I'll be back in an hour to check your blood pressure. She walked back to the nursing station as the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead and the night shift hummed forward like a machine that never stopped running. Her chart was waiting. Her patients were waiting. Her life, this careful, invisible life, was waiting for her to maintain it the way she maintained everything else. 7 doctors had said no to General Marcus Wade. She had not said anything yet. But something underneath her composure, something that lived in the scars and the memories and the part of her that had died in Baghdad, was already saying yes. Her hands knew what her voice could not admit. Her body remembered what her mind had ordered herself to forget. And somewhere in the darkened ICU, a blind man lay on a hospital bed and touched the tattoo of the woman who'd saved him, never knowing that she was 3 feet away, checking his vitals, keeping him alive a second time the way she'd kept him alive the first time, in absolute silence, with perfect precision, and with everything that mattered locked so deep inside herself that nobody would ever be able to find it. Not yet. But the clock was running now. She could feel it in the way her left leg ached, in the way her hands moved on the chart, in the way General Wade kept turning his head toward the sound of her voice, the voice of a ghost, checking on the only man alive who knew her true name. The morning briefing happened at 0600, fluorescent lights humming their mechanical prayer, 12 nurses gathered around the assignment board like mourners at a funeral. Dr. Hargrove stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, his silk tie catching light like a blade. General Marcus Wade had arrived at Mercy General sometime in the dark hours, transferred from Walter Reed, his chart thick as a novel, flagged in red. Blind. Post-traumatic complications. Complex. The words they used when they meant too much work. 7 doctors had already refused him. Not declined politely. Refused. The attending cardiologist cited liability. The pulmonologist said resource constraints. The infectious disease specialist didn't even come to the conference. By the time the assignment board went up that morning, Wade's name sat there like an anchor with no tether, admitted to the ICU, no physician willing to take ownership of his care. No one willing to stake their reputation on a blind general with invisible wounds. Brooke Sullivan stood at the back of the briefing room, her badge clipped to her scrubs, her hand steady. She'd worked Mercy General's ICU night shift for 93 days. 93 days of keeping her voice soft, her history buried, her past tattooed on a forearm she couldn't let herself touch. She'd heard about Wade's arrival from the night nurse giving report, heard the name, heard Special Forces, heard blinded, and felt something shift in her chest like tectonic plates realigning. So Wade's unassigned, one of the senior nurses said. Who's taking him? Silence. The kind of silence that moves through a room like a living thing, pressing down, suffocating. Brooke's hand rose. Quiet. Steady. I'll take him. 12 pairs of eyes turned to her. Dr. Hargrove's narrowed, not with surprise, but with something colder. Calculation. His fingers drummed against the table once, twice, 3 times. She watched him process, a new nurse, no seniority, no allies on the unit. A nurse he could move. A nurse who could disappear if necessary. Nurse Sullivan, he said, his voice smooth as oil on water. That's generous of you. Perhaps you have some special training in post-traumatic care I'm not aware of. I've worked critical care for, she stopped herself. 12 years. 3 tours. 2 continents. She swallowed. I'm ready to support his care, doctor. He smiled. The smile of a man who'd just seen an opening. Then I'll oversee his case personally. You'll follow my protocols exactly. No improvisation. Understood? Yes, doctor. She meant it. She understood perfectly. The shift began at 1900 hours. Brooke moved through Wade's room with mechanical precision, checking the foresight, running a saline flush, adjusting the oxygen delivery tubing from his nose. His daughter Rebecca sat in the vinyl chair beside the bed, dark circles under her eyes, holding her father's hand like it might disappear. Wade's other hand lay across his abdomen, relaxed. Asleep. Then the door opened. Dr. Hargrove entered with the velocity of a man with a plan. His cologne arrived first, something expensive, something that smelled like money and ambition. He glanced at Brooke, then spoke directly to Rebecca, his voice pitched low with concern. General Wade deserves the absolute best care, he said. Which is why I need to address a small administrative issue. Rebecca looked confused. Brooke's spine remained vertical. Nurse Sullivan, Hargrove continued, turning to face her. Did you access this patient's chart before your assignment authorization came through? She'd prepared for this. She'd known it was coming the moment her hand rose at the briefing. I reviewed the case file to prepare, Doctor. To understand his presentation. You reviewed his chart. He repeated the words slowly, as though she'd confessed to a crime. Without authorization. From his physician. Your father deserves our best people, Rebecca, Hargrove said, his attention pivoting back to the daughter with theatrical precision. Not someone who can't follow basic protocols. Not someone who has a habit of overstepping. He tilted his head slightly, regretful. Nurse Sullivan here often thinks she knows better than physicians who've actually been to medical school. It's a concerning pattern. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. Her grip on Wade's hand tightened. Brooke took one measured breath. The kind of breath that came before a jump, before rappelling from a helicopter, before saying goodbye to a version of yourself that could never come back. Her eyes remained on Hargrove's face, not confrontational, not submissive. Just present. Then she felt it, the warm sting of a single tear forming at the corner of her left eye. She willed it to fall. Allowed it. Caught it with the back of her hand, pressing her skin without breaking his gaze. When she spoke, her voice was quiet. Steady. Absolute. I've been dismissed by better men than you, Doctor. Hargrove's jaw tightened. Rebecca's eyes widened. Wade shifted in his sleep, his left forearm rotating slightly, and there it was. Sullivan. Black block letters beneath a combat medic cross. The call sign. The name. The person whose voice he'd followed through darkness and fire and the kind of fear that shapes itself into muscle memory. Brooke looked away first. Resumed checking Wade's vitals. Took his blood pressure with the steady hands of someone who'd done this 10,000 times before. Hargrove left. But not before posting his write-up on the staff board at 14:20 that afternoon, a formal notice in blue ink, Nurse B.A. Sullivan, unauthorized chart access. Insubordination. Failure to respect chain of command. Recommend retraining or reassignment. His signature was precise, almost artistic. The break room at 1800 hours smelled like lukewarm coffee and the ghost of someone's microwaved fish. Brooke sat down with her dinner, grilled chicken, rice, steamed broccoli, and opened a 3-month-old magazine. She'd made it approximately 60 seconds before she heard the chairs scraping. Soft. Deliberate. 3 nurses gathered their belongings. One whispered to another. Brooke heard the words clearly. Hargrove says she's a liability. Says she doesn't respect physician authority. They moved to a different table, their bodies angled away, their message clear as a surgical scar. Brooke ate methodically. Chicken first. Rice second. Broccoli last. Her hands were steady even as her eyes remained fixed on the grey laminate tabletop. She'd sat alone before. She'd sat in forward operating bases with mortar fire walking closer, sat in the desert drinking water that tasted like copper and dust, sat in bars trying to remember how to be human instead of a weapon. This was easier. This was harder. During evening rounds, Hargrove examined Wade's chest with a stethoscope, his movements theatrical. Brooke had documented Wade's vitals every 30 minutes, blood pressure stable, oxygen saturation holding at 96%, heart sounds clear. Hargrove looked at the chart, then looked at her, then looked at the 2 residents and 1 medical student standing nearby like an audience. Our little protocol problem here, he said, gesturing vaguely toward Brooke, seems to think she's qualified to interpret cardiac findings. Perhaps you could explain to Nurse Sullivan what a stethoscope actually measures? Or would that be above her pay grade? One of the residents looked uncomfortable. The medical student stared at her shoes. Brooke adjusted Wade's for line. The fluid dripped clear and steady. Does anyone understand cardiac pathophysiology? Hargrove continued. Probably not. Most nurses just follow orders without thinking. Which is why I'm the physician here, and Nurse Sullivan is not. Wade's head turned slightly, his sightless eyes moving in the direction of Hargrove's voice. Doctor, is there a problem? None whatsoever, General. Just reminding my staff of their limitations. The words landed. Brooke watched them land. Then she finished her charting and moved on to the next patient, her face composed, her breathing steady, her heart counting time like a metronome made of titanium. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came at 2,200 hours when she returned to Wade's room during her break and found him awake, waiting, his blind eyes pointed toward the sound of her approaching footsteps. She'd meant to walk past. Check his vitals. Leave. Instead she found herself stopping. General, she said. Nurse Sullivan. His voice was rough, tired. Sit for a moment. She shouldn't have. Every protocol screamed against it. But she Saturday. And Wade, without moving his head, asked her about herself, where she was from, did she have family, had she traveled anywhere worth remembering. She answered carefully. Portland. Yes, a son. Some. Each word measured, honest but incomplete. A glass of water that looked full until he realized there was nothing beneath the surface. You move like a soldier, Wade said, not a question. Efficient. No wasted motion. My combat medic used to move like that. Sullivan. Best medic I ever served with. His blind face turned toward her, and for a moment Brooke thought the world might simply stop. You remind me of that. Of her. Brooke's hands gripped the edge of the chair. Her left leg had begun aching, the old wound from the Humvee, the one that never quite healed. She stood before she could respond. 12-hour shifts teach economy of movement, General. She left before he could speak again. In the medication room, she pressed her palm against the wall and breathed like she was learning the skill for the first time. Her hand covered the small name tape on her scrubs, Sullivan. Hidden beneath her badge. The radio crackled somewhere. A monitor beeped 3 rooms down. Fluorescent lights hummed their mechanical prayer. She had 4 shifts left with him. Then Hargrove would move her to a different unit. Then Wade would be transferred to a physician who would dismiss his symptoms, who would miss the subtle signs, who would document his death as an acceptable outcome. And Brooke would move on. Become someone else. Disappear again. Unless something changed. 3 days passed like a held breath. Wade's condition tightened like a fist. By the second night, Brooke noticed the subtle betrayals, the kind most nurses would miss, the kind that separated adequate care from survival. His jugular veins began to distend, visible cords rising along his neck with each breath. Not normal. Not something a simple fever would cause. She documented it. Pressure holding steady at 118/72, fluids running, antibiotics cycling through his line, and still the veins climbed higher. She found Hargrove at the nursing station at 2,100 hours, reviewing charts with the expression of a man reviewing minor complaints. General Wade's JVD is progressing, she said. 5 words. Clinical. Calm. Hargrove didn't look up. What do you want me to do? He's on diuretics. His heart sounds are changing. 4 words. Each one a stone she was laying down. He finally glanced at her, and something flickered behind his eyes, not concern. Recognition that she was pushing again. His ejection fraction was acceptable at admission. Stop looking for problems. But by the evening of the 3rd day, Wade's neck veins were distended all the way to his jaw, visible even when his head tilted back. Brooke had seen this once before, in Baghdad, in the field hospital at Camp Lezan, the unmistakable roadmap of a heart drowning in its own fluid. She pulled up his latest vital signs at 2,200 hours, blood pressure 82/50 and dropping. Heart rate 114. Respiratory rate 24. The numbers were writing a story his doctor didn't want to read. She walked to his bedside. Wade lay propped on pillows, his sightless eyes tracking her movements by sound, by air displacement, by the muscle memory of a man who had learned to hunt in darkness. "How are you feeling, General?" she asked. "Tired. Chest feels." He paused, searching for the word. "Tight. Like someone sitting on me." She placed her stethoscope against his chest. The heart sounds came through muffled, distant, as if his heart was beating underwater. Muffled. Distant. Distended neck veins. Drop blood pressure. Beck's triad. The clinical constellation of cardiac tamponade, fluid compressing his heart, suffocating it from the outside. She needed confirmation. The ultrasound probe was in the cabinet near the supply room, locked because Hargrove insisted nurses request imaging through the imaging department, which meant a 2-hour wait minimum. Brooke had ultrasound certification. She'd logged 247 cardiac probe hours in her previous life, but that previous life was erased, and using the probe without a physician's order would be practicing medicine. She opened the cabinet anyway. Her hands knew what to do. The probe hummed to life. She placed it on Wade's chest, angled toward his pericardium, and there it was, a dark pool surrounding his heart like floodwater, millimeters of fluid becoming centimeters, the chamber collapsing inward under the pressure. Massive pericardial effusion. Not from infection. From hemorrhage. Something inside him was bleeding. She documented everything. Time. Findings. Hargrove's refusal to order imaging. The ultrasound results. She noted it all in the record like a woman building a case for a lawsuit she hoped would never need to be filed. Then she paged him. Stat. He arrived 17 minutes later, moving with the careful irritation of a man interrupted during something important. His tie was loosened, his hair still damp from a shower. He'd been at home, asleep, unaware that one of his patients was suffocating from the inside. His pressure's dropping, Brooke said. Heart sounds are muffled. JVD to the jaw. I suspect cardiac tamponade. I pulled an ultrasound and found. You pulled an ultrasound. His voice carried the weight of betrayal, as if she'd stolen something sacred. With my certification. The findings show. You do not have the authority to order imaging. He stepped past her to Wade's bedside, placed his stethoscope to the general's chest for approximately 4 seconds, then turned back to her. His pressure's always been low. Stop creating emergencies to make yourself look important. Give him a 500 cubic centimeters fluid bolus and leave him alone. His ejection fraction is compromised by external compression. Fluid will only. I said give him the fluid. Hargrove blocked her path to the computer terminal, his body a physical barrier between her and the echocardiogram order she was reaching for. This is exactly why you're being moved. You don't know your limitations. You're a nurse, Sullivan. You take temperatures and empty bedpans. I make the medical decisions. You follow orders. She could feel the tremor in her chest, not fear. Not even anger. It was restraint. The trembling of a woman holding back a decade of command, of surgical knowledge, of a call sign that had meant something once in a place most people couldn't find on a map. She stepped back. Yes, doctor. He walked away. She hung the fluid bolus. She watched him leave the ICU through the glass doors, saw him get into the elevator, saw the doors close on his smug, certain face. Then she looked at the monitor. Wade's blood pressure was still 82/50. The fluid wouldn't help. It would make him worse. And Hargrove was asleep, or changing, or somewhere in this hospital convinced he'd just shut down another problem nurse. She turned to the charge nurse. I'm staying past shift. General Wade needs continuous monitoring. Can you assign my other 3 patients to coverage? The charge nurse nodded without looking up. She'd seen this before, nurses protecting patients when doctors had already decided the patients weren't worth protecting. Brooke pulled a chair to Wade's bedside and sat down. The monitor beeped its steady rhythm. 82/50. 114. 24 breaths. She knew what these numbers meant. They meant she had maybe 6 hours before his heart stopped completely. Maybe less. Wade's hand moved across the bed rail, searching for contact. "You're still here." "I'm not going anywhere, General." Her voice came out steady. The voice that had guided men through fire. The voice that had never cracked, not once, not when it counted. He found her hand. His grip was weak, but it was there. "My daughter. Tell me about her." 16. Bright. Wants to study medicine. A pause. His breathing was labored now, pulling harder with each word. "She doesn't know I was blind when she visited. I kept my eyes closed so she wouldn't have to see it." Brooke said nothing. She held his hand and watched the monitor. She thought of Baghdad. She thought of carrying his weight through a sandstorm, of dragging him across 2 kilometers of open ground with bullets splitting the air like angry wasps, of his blood soaking through her gear and the promise she'd made, "You're going to see her again. You're going to watch her graduate." The hours moved like a funeral procession. Midnight came and went. The clock became the only sound in the room besides the monitor's steady beep. Brooke didn't leave. She didn't call Hargrove again. She watched Wade's pressure continue its slide, 82 to 78 to 75. She watched his heart rate climb. She watched his breathing become work. At 02 for 7 hours, Wade gasped. His back arched. His hand clutched hers with sudden, terrible strength. "Can't breathe." The monitor alarm screamed. Heart rate 134. Blood pressure 68/42. His oxygen sat diving toward numbers that meant organ failure, that meant the end. Hargrove was asleep somewhere in Portland. The code team was 4 minutes away from the ICU. Wade had maybe 90 seconds before his heart stopped completely. Maybe less. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the clarity. The absolute stillness of knowing exactly what needed to happen and exactly how much would cost her to do it. The worst part was having already paid the price once before, and knowing she was about to pay it again. The alarms came first. One sharp chirp from the cardiac monitor, then a cascade of warnings that turned the quiet ICU into an urgent symphony of distress. Wade's heart rate spiked to 134, his blood pressure cratering, 68/42 and dropping like a stone. His eyes flew open, confusion giving way to pure animal panic as his body betrayed him, as his lungs suddenly couldn't pull enough air. Brooke was moving before conscious thought could catch up, muscle memory firing like a sniper's trigger. She'd trained for this. She'd lived through worse. She wasn't waiting for the code team. She wasn't calling overhead. She wasn't waiting for Hargrove. She elevated Wade's bed to 45 degrees, her hands moving with the terrifying fluid precision of someone who'd made 1,000 life-or-death decisions before breakfast. The ultrasound probe was in her hands, cold gel across his chest, and there it was, the massive pericardial effusion, dark fluid swallowing his heart whole, squeezing the life out of it with every impossible beat. 200 milliliters. Maybe more. His heart was suffocating inside his own chest cavity. The pericardiocentesis kit was already open. She'd prepared it 3 hours ago, knowing. The spinal needle gleamed under the fluorescent lights, sterile and waiting like a scalpel in a surgeon's hand. A 60-milliliter syringe. Betadine. Gauze. Everything she needed and nothing she should use without a physician's order, without authorization, without a license that now felt paper-thin and watermarked with lies. Wade gasped, his hands clawing at the bed rails. His oxygen saturation was dropping, 84%, 80%, the monitor screaming in digital agony. Brooke leaned down close to his ear, her voice dropping into the register she'd used in Baghdad when men were dying and emotion was a luxury they couldn't afford. "General, I need you to stay with me." Her hands prepped his chest with betadine in broad, practice strokes. "This is going to hurt, but I'm going to fix it. You trust me?" Wade nodded, couldn't speak, his whole body rigid with the oxygen starvation that was slowly strangling his brain. His hands found hers for just a moment, a grip like a drowning man finding rope. She found the subxiphoid landmark, the space beneath his sternum where the needle needed to go, angled toward his left shoulder at a 45-degree angle. She'd done this in a burning field hospital with no anesthesia and a patient screaming. She could do it here, in this climate-controlled room with monitors and nurses one hallway away. "Breathe slow," she whispered, advancing the needle with millimeter precision. "I've got you. You're not dying today. Not on my watch." The needle slid through skin, through fascia, through the pericardial sac's tough membrane. Wade's back arched, pain, shock, the sensation of invasion, but his breath caught and held steady because she'd told him to. Because this voice had saved his life before and some part of him, some muscle memory older than conscious thought, still recognized it. The syringe filled with dark blood. Not red. Dark. Deoxygenated, suffocating, drowning his heart. She evacuated 45 milliliters in one smooth motion, then 50, then the needle no longer touched the fluid and Wade's lungs opened like a flower after rain. His blood pressure climbed, 88 over 54, 92, 102 over 68. His oxygen saturation rose, 86%, 90%, 94%, climbing like a rescue helicopter. His heart rate dropped from the panic sprint of 134 to 104, to 98, to 84, settling into sinus rhythm like a creature learning to breathe again. She withdrew the needle, applied direct pressure with gauze, and held his hand as his face transformed from asphyxiated terror into something almost peaceful. The tremor in his grip eased. His breathing synchronized with the ventilator instead of fighting it. "You saved my life," he whispered, his voice raw and fractured. She thought, again, but said nothing. The room stayed quiet for 4 more seconds. Then the doors burst open. Hargrove came through like a man struck by lightning, his face the color of old clay. He took one look at Brooke standing over Wade with bloody gloves, one look at the syringe on the procedure tray still wet with pericardial fluid, and something in his expression shifted from confusion to cold white rage. His jaw clenched. His hands formed fists. His eyes moved from Wade's stabilizing vitals to Brooke's face and back again, calculating, recalibrating, understanding with absolute certainty that she'd just done something that would either save her career or end it completely. Hargrove pulled out his phone. His finger moved across the screen with mechanical precision. The first call connected before Brooke could even step back from the bedside. "This is Dr. Hargrove at Mercy General. I need to speak with the board president immediately. It's an emergency." Pause. Reckless practicing beyond scope. Endangered a patient. Possible assault. His voice carried down the hallway like an announcement in a courtroom. She performed an invasive procedure without physician authorization. "I have a general officer who can testify." The second call came 30 seconds later. Hospital legal counsel. Same message, different words. Liability. Scope creep. Documentation that proved Brooke had accessed the pericardiocentesis kit without a physician's order. Exposure. The third call was the worst. State licensing investigator. One cold sentence, "I'm reporting an authorized medical practice." By 4 in the morning, Brooke was sitting in the administrator's office on the 4th floor, still in her scrubs, still wearing the blood she'd earned saving General Wade's life. No lawyer. No union representative. No one in her corner because there was no one to call. The woman she was supposed to be didn't have a past to explain. Senior Chief Petty Officer Brooke Sullivan couldn't exist in this room without revealing secrets that would end her in federal prison. By 8 o'clock, her badge was confiscated. By noon, her locker was cleared out while security watched, a witness to her erasure. They placed her hospital ID, her stethoscope, her personal items into a cardboard box with the efficiency of men performing a burial. No one made eye contact. No one spoke. The hallway emptied when she walked through it, staff dissolving like smoke. She drove home in silence, still wearing her scrubs, the fabric stiff with dried blood that had belonged to a man she'd saved twice now, and both times it had cost her everything. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Daniel came home from school and found her at the kitchen table still wearing her jacket, tears streaming down her face like rain on a windshield. He dropped his backpack and his voice cracked with something between fear and confusion. "Mom? Why are you home early?" She couldn't find words. How do you explain to your child that you've saved the same man twice and both times it destroyed you? How do you tell him that the military records that should prove her service were erased by a general's order, that the woman he knew as his mother was built on a foundation of official lies? How do you explain that she'd just been fired for using the training the Pentagon gave her, the skills she'd earned in Baghdad, the muscle memory that was wired into her nervous system? She just held him and cried, not from fear of what came next, but from the exhaustion of holding a lie together for this long, of being a ghost in scrubs, of saving a man twice and having both rescues come back to haunt her like ghosts of her own buried service. The tears fell in the kitchen of a house that wasn't registered in her real name, on a street where her neighbors would never know her rank, in a life that existed in the margins of official records. Her son's hand on her shoulder was the only thing that felt real. Everything else was camouflage that had finally, after 3 months of perfect composure, perfect performance, perfect invisible heroism, finally begun to unravel. Outside, it started to rain. 3 days later, the hospital board convenes in the executive conference room on the 14th floor of Mercy General. 12 administrators sit around a mahogany table that costs more than Brooke makes in a year. Legal counsel spreads documents like a dealer laying out cards. The air tastes like recycled oxygen and institutional fear. Dr. Hargrove sits at the table center, composed as a man who has never lost a battle he chose to fight. His tailored suit costs $3,000. His shoes have never touched a hospital floor at midnight. He adjusts his cufflinks, a gesture of supreme confidence, and nods at the board president. This will take 20 minutes. Maybe less. The door opens. A nurse wheels General Marcus Wade into the conference room. Wade sits upright despite the pain that moves through his ribs like broken glass. His hands grip something worn, a pair of combat boots, desert tan, leather creased from 1,000 miles of walking through heat and dust and impossible choices. The boots are scarred. They smell like Baghdad. Wade's daughter Rebecca follows behind him, her jaw set like a soldier's. Nobody at the table speaks. The silence is so thick you could operate in it. Wade's hands rise. He reaches forward, searching the air with the instinctive precision of a blind man who has learned to navigate the world through touch and memory. His fingers find Brooke's face. She stands motionless as his hands trace the contours, her cheekbone, her temple, the small scar along her jawline from a ricochet in Sanjan Valley, Helmand Province, a place that officially never existed. His fingers stop on that scar. When he speaks, his voice drops to a frequency that only 3 people in the room understand. Reaper. The word hangs like a defibrillator paddle pressed to a flatline heart. Hargrove's composure cracks. Just barely. A tremor moves through his right hand. He reaches for water that isn't there. Daniel stands. Brooke's son. 16 years old. 5'11". The same jawline as his mother. His voice cracks like it belongs to someone learning how to be a man. My mother is Senior Chief Petty Officer Brooke Sullivan. The room doesn't just go quiet. The room stops breathing. A Navy JAG officer in dress blues rises from the back of the room. His hands shake as he opens a classified file folder, the kind with headers that say declassified at General Marcus Wade's request, and beneath that, dates, 2019. 2020, 2021. He reads her service record in a voice barely above a whisper. Senior Chief Petty Officer Brooke Sullivan. 12 years of service. 3 deployments. 14 classified operations. A black site in Baghdad where official records were erased by order of a 3-star general. Threat assessment, prison or worse if she ever surfaced. She was ordered to disappear. Her records were deleted. She became a ghost. She spent for years in civilian life, the JAG officer continues, while her past was legally non-existent. She was told she had no other choice. A SEAL team leader steps forward. His dress whites are immaculate. His ribbons tell stories that can't be declassified. When he speaks, his voice carries the weight of men who have bled beside the woman he's about to describe. Senior Chief Sullivan performed emergency combat medicine in 17 field situations with a 94% survival rate. She pulled General Wade from a burning Humvee under sustained enemy fire at 03 for 7 hours on March 14, 2019, while carrying 140 pounds of gear and a man who couldn't move. She walked for miles through active combat zones while bleeding from a shrapnel wound in her left shoulder. He pauses. She has a Navy Cross, 2 silver stars, a Purple Heart, and she's been working the night shift at a hospital in Portland, Oregon, for the past 3 months, saving lives under an assumed identity because she was ordered to forget she was ever a soldier. He places the medals on the table. 1, 2, 3. Each one separate. Each one heavy with the weight of impossible choices. The board president's face goes the color of old concrete. An FBI agent in a dark suit steps forward. His badge glints under fluorescent light. Dr. Hargrove, we've been investigating your billing practices for 8 months. Senior Chief Sullivan's case provided the final evidence we needed for prosecution. He opens a folder. Over 47 patients. 3 years. $2,340,000 in fraudulent consultations billed through military insurance specifically because military insurance has fewer verification protocols than civilian policies. You targeted veterans intentionally. You knew they wouldn't question the billing. Hargrove's hands move to his throat. His mouth opens. Nothing comes out. Your medical license is suspended pending criminal proceedings, the FBI agent continues. You're under arrest for healthcare fraud, wire fraud, forgery of employment records, and obstruction of federal investigation. He nods at 2 agents positioned near the door. They move like they have done this before. The cuffs are steel. Not flex cuffs for compliant suspects. Steel cuffs that click loud in the silence, click, click, a sound like closing a door you can never open again. Hargrove's voice finally emerges, desperate and thin. I was protecting the hospital from liability. She had no right to perform that procedure without authorization. The SEAL team leader's voice drops to a whisper that somehow carries to every corner of the room. Senior Chief Sullivan has forgotten more about combat medicine than you'll ever know about anything. You were billing an old man's insurance while she was saving his life. That's not protection, doctor. That's betrayal. They walk Hargrove toward the door. His legs buckle after 3 steps. The agents catch him by the elbows. By the time they reach the threshold, he's weeping. By the time they reach the elevator, he's broken into pieces small enough that nobody will ever reassemble them. General Wade drops to both knees before Brooke. Not weakness. This is the posture of a warrior honoring another warrior. He presses the combat boots into her hands, the boots she left behind when Medevac pulled him out, when her mission ended and she became a ghost. Brooke kneels too. Their foreheads touch. Both of them crying for the first time in years. For the choices that cost everything. For the orders that demanded silence. For the 4 years of invisible heroism in a hospital where nobody knew her name. Daniel places his hand on his mother's shoulder. The board president stands. His voice cracks as he speaks the words that should have come 3 days ago, 3 months ago, 4 years ago. Thank you for your service, Senior Chief. The words move through the room like ripples on water that has finally been still long enough to remember how to move. Someone begins to clap. Then another. Then the entire conference room is applauding a woman who spent for years as a ghost, who saved lives in the dark, who never asked for recognition because she never expected to receive it. In the parking lot, as news crews arrive and cameras begin capturing Hargrove's perp walk, his head down, his hands cuffed behind his back, his career and his freedom reduced to the sound of handcuffs clicking in the afternoon rain, Brooke stands in her scrubs and tells a reporter the only thing that matters. Sometimes the bravest warriors carry stethoscopes, not guns. She goes home, places her combat boots back in her locker at Mercy General, returns for her next shift because the ICU has 20 beds and soldiers still need someone who won't quit on them. Daniel knows the truth now. Wade knows who saved him twice. And Dr. Hargrove will spend the next 3 years in federal prison before teaching CPR certification courses for $13 an hour at a community college where nobody will ever know he once held people's lives in his hands and decided billing was more important than breathing. The rain stops. The night shift begins. Brooke Sullivan walks into the ICU and does what she has always done, the thing she was born to do. She saves lives. She holds the dying. She performs miracles on a salary that barely covers rent. And for the first time in 4 years, she does it as herself. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who didn't know your true value, drop a comment below. And if you believe in recognizing the quiet heroes among us, hit that subscribe button. Thank you for watching.